Hey, what's up guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing an Infernity deck profile. So Infernities are a very interesting deck that basically just loop through your copy of Archfiend until you finally have this crazy board with upwards of 8 negates on your side of the field, and it's just an insanely good deck. Now I have changed up the deck quite a bit since the previous build. The previous build was a 50 card build, and this is actually a 40 card build, which is a really drastic change from the previous build, and I'm really excited to show you guys this deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell near so you can come part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards like getting your name stripped in a single video, getting a signed card to the mail, or even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, you're going to be playing a single copy of Infernity Archfiend. Now I really thought on the last ban list that we were actually going to get this card back to 2 or even 3 because this card is just not, you need more copies of this for this deck, and we just got support for Infernities, and there's support coming for this deck too. So maybe on the next list we'll get more copies of Infernity Archfiend, but for now you just have one copy of it. And what it does is when you have no cards in your hand, you can reveal this card when you draw it, and when you reveal it you get to special summon it. And when this card is special summoned, if you have no cards in your hand at all, you get to add one Infernity card from your deck to your hand, which is usually going to be your copy of Infernity Barrier, which is really good to be able to negate all sorts of stuff against your opponent. We then play a single copy of Infernity Patriarch. Patriarch is if this is the only card in your hand, you can special summon it, and you can only special summon Infernity Patriarch once per turn this way. And while you control no cards in your hand, if an Infernity monster you control would be destroyed by battle by card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead, which is a really good effect. We then play 2 copies of Infernity Necromancer. I just feel like 2 Necromancers is fine. You never want to draw into multiple copies of this card, and you can kind of just loop through 2 of them, because when this card is normal summoned, you change it to defense, and then while you have no cards in your hand, this card gains the following effect: to once per turn, special summon 1 Infernity monster from your graveyard except another copy of itself. But the really cool thing is it doesn't say you can only do that by its name effect, it just says that you can do that once per turn. So if it leaves the field and then comes back, you can do it again, which is what you usually do. You link climb, bring it back from the grave, and then use its effect, bring back Archfiend. Archfiend searches, you link him away, and then you go from there to revive it back, and then you loop through again, and then keep link climbing until you finally have a board that your opponent cannot deal with. So basically this and this card are the most insane cards. We then play 2 copies of Infernity Wildcat. Wildcat I just bumped down to a 2 of in this deck because you can special summon this card from your hand by sending 1 other Infernity monster in your hand to the graveyard, and you only use special summon this card once per turn this way. And then while you have no cards in your hand, you can banish an Infernity card from your grave and increase or decrease its level by 1, which is pretty good to help you get into some rank 4 plays into this deck, or into some level 8 synchro monsters. We then play 1 copy of Infernity Conjurer. Conjurer is really good, but it's really good for having as an additional name for an Infernity card, that while you have no cards in your hand and monster your opponent controls, lose 800 attack. And then while you have no cards in your hand and this card's in your grave, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field, which is pretty good just to be able to get you another monster on your side of the field if you don't have anything. And it helps you go into a Sea Dragon Levenair because you're going to be able to revive back your banished Archfiend. We then play a single copy of Infernity Avenger, which is basically just here to be able to use as a level 1 tuner monster. And then we play 3 copies of Mirage. Now, Infernity Mirage is my personal favorite of all the Infernity monsters. It has the ability that this card cannot be special summoned from the graveyard, and if you have no cards in your hand, you contribute this card to special summon 2 Infernity monsters from your graveyard, and this special summons from the graveyard, and then you special summon those 2 monsters, which is really good in this particular deck, because basically what you're trying to do is get to your graveyard a copy, or have no cards in your hand and have Archfiend and Necromancer in the graveyard, and then immediately normal summon out your copy, because you won't be normal summoning those out normally, to immediately, unless you've done something really wrong, and then you will immediately normal summon out your copy of Mirage, bring them back on your side of the field, your copy of your Archfiend will go off, you'll get to add a copy of a barrier to your hand, set the barrier, and then immediately use this, or link summon away your copy of your Archfiend to be able to then revive it back with a copy of Necromancer to get another search, and then you kind of just use the Archfiend over and over again to get searches in the deck. We then play 2 copies of Stygian Street Patrol. Patrol. Stygian Street Patrol, I've bumped up to 2 from the last build. I was playing it at 1 in the last build. The only important effect about this card is you can banish from the graveyard to special summon a Fiend monster with 2,000 or less attack from your hand to your side of the field. That's the only important effect about this card and the only effect that you're ever going to use on this card. We then play 3 copies of Tour Guide. Tour Guide is one of your only normal summons in the entire deck outside of your Mirage. If you normal summon out your copy of Tour Guide, then you can special summon a level 3 Fiend monster from your hand or deck. It helps you climb into your copy of Yugioh to be able to special summon out your copy of Mirage from the hand, to be able to then revive your copy of Necromancer and your copy of Archfiend to your side of the field, and be able to go into all sorts of effects. So for the copies of the monsters that you're usually going to be summoning off your Tour Guide is your Conjurer, and then we're going to have a couple of other cards, which is your 1 of Fiendish Rhino Warrior. I bumped this card down to 1 in this deck because it was kind of clogging at 3 because I would draw into multiple copies of it and I couldn't get rid of it. And so what this card does is if this card is sent to the graveyard, you get to send an additional Fiend from your deck to the graveyard, which is really good, but in hindsight, it's just a 1 of. We then play a single copy of Archfiend Eris, which will add your copy of Infernity Archfiend from your deck to your hand, and a single copy of Edgem Sabers, which has the ability to be able to put a card in your hand on top of your deck to be able to special summon it back to your side of the field. I then play 2 copies of Psychic Wielder. Psychic Wielder is a tuner monster which helps me go into Needle Fiber and then climb into some other awesome link plays, and it can special summon itself to your side of the field once per turn if you control another level 3 monster, which is pretty good, other than a Psychic Wielder. I play a single copy of Psychic Tracer, which can help me go into level 3 XZ or rank 3 XZs or synchro summon higher into other monsters, and it's not a tuner monster, which is why I play one tracker and 2 wielders. It's just a really good card overall in the deck. And then we play a single copy of Jackalope and a single copy of Tatsunoko. These are basically here just to be able to get you into more plays and ditch cards out of your hand. They're really good 1 each in the deck. I probably wouldn't play Nessie in this deck, to be honest, because it's a good card, don't get me wrong, and it has 2800 defense, but you're not really worried about that. You're kind of more concerned about getting monsters on your side of the field as quickly as possible, and just playing these 2, you're not going to run into situations like that. Unless you want to go for a full-out danger build, you just play these 2. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. I will mention you guys too, if you do decide you want to play 1 Nessie in the deck, you can drop the Upstart Goblin that I'm playing for a copy of Nessie. So for the spells, guys, we're going to be playing a single copy of Monster Reborn, which is just an extender in the deck, another copy of Monster Reborn in the form of World Legacy Succession that you can only special summon to a zone a link monster points to, 1 copy of Foolish Burial to be able to send the exact monster you need to the graveyard when you need it, 1 copy of 1 for 1 because you play a lot of level 1s in the deck. For the example, you're going to be special summoning out normally the copy of Infernity Avenger. Avenger is really good to get on your side of the field, or you can even special summon out your copy of Mirage directly from the deck, which is really, really good in this particular build. We then play a single copy of Card Destruction, just to kind of get cards out of our hand to refresh our hand and just get more combos. And then a single copy of Into the Void. Into the Void, if you have 3 or more cards in your hand, you get to draw a card, and then during the end phase, you discard your entire hand. I like this card as a 1-of in this deck because it's just going to get you so much additional advantage. We play a single copy of Upstart Goblin. I did mention before, if you want to drop this for a copy of Nessie, you can. And then we play a single copy of Launcher. Launcher is really, really good in this deck. Launcher is single-handedly the card that makes this deck insane. Well, and Archfiend. Archfiend and Launcher are probably the 2 best, and they're still at 1 to this day. Once per turn, you can send an Infernity monster from your hand to the graveyard, and then send this card to the graveyard, and then you can target 2 Infernity monsters in the grave and special summon those, but you must have no cards in your hand to activate and resolve this effect. Really, really good. 1 copy of Paranoia. Paranoia is really good. This card is really good because basically what it does is you get to tribute a dark monster, special summon an Infernity monster from your deck or graveyard with the same level but a different name, but negate its effects. And then during the main phase, at the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from the grave to target 1 Infernity monster in your grave and add it to your hand, which is really good in this particular build. And for the last 3 cards that are spells, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Void Apocalypse. So Void Apocalypse might as well be an Infernity card because you discard a card to send a fiend from your deck to the graveyard, which is the only important effect of this card, that you're basically getting cards out of the hand to send and Foolish Burial stuff to the graveyard, which is why I play this card as a 3-of. I consider bumping it down to 2 because I didn't want to clog with multiple copies of it, but it's so important that you need to see it that I play it as a 3-of. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Infernity Barrier and a single copy of Infernity Break. These cards are really good because Infernity Barrier basically says negate any monster, spell, or trap effect while you have a face-up attack position Infernity and no cards in your hand, and if you do, destroy that card. And then Infernity Break has the ability that if you control no card, or even no cards in your hand, you can target an Infernity monster you control, or Infernity monster in your graveyard, and 1 card your opponent controls, banish the first target and destroy the second, so this pops cards on the field, which is really good. You play it as a 1-of because it's just really good as a 1-of. And then the Infernity Barriers are basically just going to negate everything. You can make 3 of these. You can grab 3 of these, a break, and then have a copy of Appaloosa with 4 negates on your field, and you essentially have 7 negates. And there's more ways to actually get more with like a Void Ogre on the field to get to 8 negates. This deck can get all the way up to like 8, seriously like 8 negates on your side of the field. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of 100 Eyes Dragon. So 100 Eyes Dragon can copy the effect of literally any Fiend monster that's in your graveyard because it has the ability that once per turn, you can activate this effect to remove from play 1 level 6 or lower dark effect monster from your grave, and until he invades this card, or until he invades the turn, this monster's name and effect becomes the same as that one. This card's really important because it can copy Necromancer, it can copy your effect of Mirage to be able to tribute it, and special summon out 2 more monsters from the graveyard to be able to continue your loop. But this card is really, really good, and you need to play it at least 2. Play a second copy of Void Ogre because it can negate spells or traps if you have no cards in your hand. 1 copy of Borreload Savage because this card helps out with the negates to be able to summon to your side of the field, just to give you that added advantage, because this card is usually a card that you're going to combo. You can get this card on your side of the field, the Appaloosa with 4, and then your 3 Barrier, and it essentially gives you that 8 that you're looking for. 1 copy of Infernity Doom Archfiend. Doom Archfiend is really good because it has the ability that once per turn, you can target 1 face-up card on the field, negate its effects, and until the end of the turn. Then, if you have no cards in your hand, you destroy it as well. And then while you have no cards in your hand, if this card battles an opponent's monster, any battle damage you inflict is doubled, and a synchro monster synchro summon this card using a material can attack twice, which is really good to go from this into a Void Ogre. We then play, for the Link monsters, we're going to be playing a single copy of Appaloosa, because the Appaloosa is just going to be one of the most important cards in the extra deck to be able to go into. Double Yugioh, you're never going to make more than double Yugioh, so double is fine. The final effect to be able to draw 4 and then put 3 back, it comes up every so often, but you're usually using the effect to be able to once per turn special summon a monster in your hand, which is Mirage, that you're going to be trying to go into as quickly as possible. 1 copy of Needle Fiber. Needle Fiber is really important because you can use in this deck with your copy of Wheelator, or you can use Mirage to be able to go with this card. So this card is really easy to go into in Link Climb. 1 copy of IP Masquerena, because Masquerena can go into your copy of Appaloosa very quickly to be able to go into all sorts of different plays. Phoenix to pop spells and traps. 1 copy of Blockade Board Blocker. This card is really good at getting your copy of Launcher back, actually, because it has the ability, this card is link summoned, you can discard a card, and then during the end phase of this turn, add 1 continuous or field spell from your graveyard to your hand, and you can only see effect this card once per turn, and face-up spells you control cannot be destroyed by opponent's card effects, which is really good. You play a single copy of Cherubini. Cherubini just sends additional level 3s to the graveyard, and it's a really good card to just kind of climb with. And then a copy of Levenair the Sea Dragon, which basically can revive back your cards that are banished, which is really good. That once per turn, you can detach a material from this card, target a banished level 4 or lower monster, and special summon that card to your field, which can get your back your Stygian Street Patrol, or can get your Archfiend that's been called by the Graved, or dealt with in other ways. This card is really good at dealing with that and getting your cards back. And for the last monster in the extra, we're playing number 60, and this card basically lets you draw 2 and discard 1, or lets you double the attack of a monster, or revive a monster from the graveyard, which is really good, but you have to detach both materials, and it does have a little bit of a drawback where either you skip your battle phase, skip your next main phase 1, or you skip your next draw phase, depending on which effect you activate. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really cool deck to play with. I highly recommend that if you guys have not tried Infernities, you definitely should, because it is fun to play with Infernities. Because it's one of those decks that you can, if you don't have, like, you're not going to locals that day or something like that, you can pull this deck out and kind of solitaire with it to kind of figure out the plays and do test hands. Like I do in test hand videos, you can do those and really figure out the way that the deck plays. You don't have to play against somebody to figure out this deck, because a lot of the stuff that you're going to be doing is going to not be interacting with your opponent until your next turn, when you're going to be negating everything against your opponent, which is really cool. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on your screen, become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.